So it's 9 AM. I have had a grand total of 0 hours of sleep. But after doing my Defenders ranking video, or not my Defenders, my Netflix series ranking videos, I really want to do a video on the top 25 Arrowverse episodes of all time, in my opinion. So I want to do that instead of sleeping. So the Arrowverse has started about 7 years ago now with the pilot episode of Arrow. Over that time, it's evolved into its own universe, spanning almost 300 episodes of television, spread out over 4 live-action TV shows. Constantine kind of counts, but it also doesn't really. An animated show, 2 animated shows, and more shows on the way. So there's so many episodes in this universe, and this universe has had a bunch of ups and downs over the years, but despite all of the downs that it may have had, it's still got so many gems hidden in this 300 episode universe. So before starting, I do want to just give a runner-up shout out to The Flash Season 1 Episode 8, Flash vs. Arrow. This is an episode that I really want to include on the list, but the other 25 were just a little bit, I just wanted to include more. But because this is the very first proper crossover between The Flash and Arrow, I just want to give a little shout out, because it started the trend that every 8th episode from this point on would be a crossover episode, except for obviously this year's crossover, which is going to be episode 9 instead. But being the first crossover, it does make it kind of special. It's fun seeing the two casts interact. It's great seeing Diggle and Cisco argue over whether Barry or Oliver would win in a fight. And most importantly, we actually get to see them fight. Which is the only time we've seen Barry and Oliver fight, I believe. Yeah, but while this crossover is really unimpressive in comparison to what we get nowadays, looking back on it, when it first came out, I was so excited. I couldn't believe what I was watching, because just a year before it came out, it was Arrow Season 2, which was still Oliver being a vigilante, hunting down people like the Dollmaker, or hunting down Brother Blood. And then a year later we have this, and now 4 years later we have Superman, Supergirl, Flash, Arrow, the Flash from the 1990 TV show, all in the same crossover. It's crazy, and this episode started it all. But starting from continuing on to number 25 is Rogue Air, which is The Flash Season 1 Episode 22. Rogue Air was an episode that came out of nowhere. Here we have a story about Captain Cold teaming up with Team Flash in order to transfer prisoners, and by the end of the episode, we have Oliver Queen dressed in League of Assassins gear, and Firestorm showing up to try and help Barry stop the Reverse Flash. It was such a twist. Well, it was shown in promos leading up to the episode, but it was still crazy. We didn't know what episode it was, and with this episode being as packed as it was with a ton of Rogue stuff, which seemed to be setting up the Rogues, which never actually really went anywhere, it's crazy that they just kind of came in at the end of it. And it was such a mini crossover, and it's so small. It only lasts about 10 minutes, but it's also amazing. It's the only time we ever see Oliver Queen fight Reverse Flash. It's the only time we see Oliver Queen and Firestorm, Ronnie Raymond Firestorm team up together. It was such an interesting and unique thing, and it's still one of the best scenes in my opinion to come out of any of the shows. Number 24, I have Flash of Two Worlds, which is The Flash Season 2, Episode 2. So, Flash of Two Worlds is one of the most significant episodes in the entire Arrowverse, and with good reason. Flash of Two Worlds is also the name of one of the most famous Flash comics from the 60s, and that issue gave us the first meeting of Jay Garrick and Barry Allen. The comic introduced us to the multiverse by having the Flash from the Golden Age and Earth 2 meet the Flash from the current age at that time, which is Barry Allen from Earth 1. And that's actually exactly what this episode was. It was slowly easing us into the multiverse, which is still used constantly in every episode of The Flash to this day. And Barry Allen and Jay Garrick meeting together was so cool. It did turn out that he wasn't real Jay Garrick, and I actually really enjoyed Teddy Sears as Jay Garrick. I like John Wesley Shipp, but I did kind of prefer Teddy Sears, even though John Wesley Shipp is a much more comic accurate Jay Garrick. But there was also a little scene in this episode where they recreated the comic book cover. It was where Patty Spivot shouts, I forget, it's been a while since I've seen the episode, but she says Flash, I think, and she just kind of looks up holding her hand over her head, and there is a little pillar in the middle, and it shows Barry and Jay both running around both sides of it. It was so great. I love it, that tiny scene, so much. At number 23 is Star City 2046, which is Legends of Tomorrow Season 1 Episode 6. So, being completely honest, Legends of Tomorrow's first season is extremely mediocre. It never really had any impressive highs, but it also never really reached any serious lows. But Star City 2046 stands out, and it still is, when I think of Legends of Tomorrow, this episode is still one that I think back to. So the episode is about the Legends getting stuck in Star City of 2046. Star City has now been taken over by Grant Wilson, who is one of Deathstroke's sons, one that hasn't actually appeared outside of this episode yet. Interesting enough, the current season of Arrow seems to be going down a similar path as this episode in the flash forwards, but the city was conquered 20 years before the episode, and we were shown an extremely old and broken Oliver Queen, and he's given up on life. He feels that his friends have given up on him. He's been living on his own for the last while. And we also got Connor Hawke, one of the greatest characters in the Green Arrow mythos, in this episode. A character who still hasn't appeared outside of this episode, unless you count John's baby son. Number 22 is Dead to Rights, Arrow Season 1 Episode 16. Okay, so admittedly, Dead to Rights isn't in near the same league as some of the other Arrow episodes on this list, but this one was dark and gritty, and it was, at the time, the show at its best. The episode was all about how Deadshot has returned to kill Malcolm Merlyn, and Oliver needs to stop it at all costs. This episode has some of my favourite fight scenes in the entire show, and it gave us an amazing scene where Tommy Merlyn discovers that Oliver is the Green Arrow, or not the Green Arrow, the Hood. But this episode kind of had everything going for it, and it was a turning point in the plot of the season, but it was also just showing how good the show could be. And the episode before this one was The Odyssey, which was also, 2 episodes before this one was The Odyssey, the one before this one was Dodger. But The Odyssey was also showing what the show could be when it let itself not get stuck in the CW kind of trope thingies, and this episode was, again, it stretching its wings out of that. Number 21 is The Justice Society of America, Legends of Tomorrow Season 2 Episode 2. So, the first 2 episodes of Legends of Tomorrow's second season immediately changed the direction and trajectory of the show, and it changed the show for the better. Season 2 of Legends of Tomorrow is still my favourite season of that show, and it's also at the very top of the Arrowverse for me. But these 2 episodes showed a huge increase in quality, and it also helped the Justice Society of America, which is DC's very first superhero team. They were essentially the precursor to the Justice League. They showed up in the season, and they were shown great. They didn't, waste time just trying to explain all of the characters. They just threw them right into the episode. They just had them show up and fight the Legends. It was great. The JSA versus the Legends fight scene is my favourite scene in the entire show. I still rewatch that scene a lot of the time because the soundtrack, the Legends being completely outmatched against these Golden Age heroes, it is so great, and we're still feeling the effects of these characters on the show today, as characters such as Amaya are still showing up constantly. It also showed us the formation of the Legion of Doom, with both Reverse Flash and Damien Dark joining together. Number 20 is The Adventures of Supergirl, Supergirl Season 2 Episode 1. So I'm going to be honest, there is not many Supergirl episodes on this list. I still enjoy the show, but it never really reaches the highs that the other shows do. But occasionally the show will reach a high that the other shows do, and Adventures of Supergirl is one of them. All throughout the first season of the show, we got constant allusions to the Man of Steel. Rarely an episode passed that we didn't get a reference to him or something similar. At a certain point, I kind of accepted the fact that my all-time favourite hero would only be seen through text to Kara or weird, out of frame shots of him showing up, handing his hand out. It's exactly what Titans is doing at the moment with Bruce Wayne. But this all changed in the premiere for season 2 when Superman actually showed up, and it was amazing. It was the first time ever that we really got a live action showing of the Man of Steel and the Girl of Steel teaming up together. Smallville showed us bits of this, but it never really did it justice. This episode, however, did it in the best way possible. It was the cousinly bond that him and Kara shared that made this episode so great, and it was a very fitting way to begin this show's second season. Unfortunately, the rest of the season didn't even slightly live up to what this episode set up. Number 19 is Versus Zoom, which is The Flash Season 2 Episode 18. So, Season 2 of The Flash, I think, is much better than the first. Well, not much better than the first season. I'm getting ahead of myself there. It's better than the first season. Most people do think Season 1 is better, but Season 2 just has so much going for it. I loved almost every episode, but after I loved almost every episode up until this episode. After this episode, things did kind of get a little mediocre and the season did fall apart slightly. But Versus Zoom, however, was an intense episode that gave us the rematch between Barry and Hunter. We got to see Hunter's backstory, and it mirrored Barry's in such a good way. It showed that Hunter and Barry had such similar backstories. The only difference was that Hunter was never given the opportunities Barry was. Hunter was treated much more harshly than Barry was, and if Hunter had the love that Barry had growing up, Hunter might have grown up to be a hero instead of a villain. And it wouldn't have been much of a leap for if the roles were reversed. If Barry was in Hunter's shoes, Barry could have easily become Zoom, or if Hunter was in Barry's shoes, Hunter could have easily become the Flash. It did such a good job of showing us this. Number 18 is Checkmate, Arrow Season 5 Episode 16. So Season 5 of Arrow was a huge return to form for the entire show. Season 3, which I still enjoyed, was a downgrade from Seasons 1 and 2, and Season 4 was downright bad. But Season 5 really brought things back. And I don't think I've ever been more invested in Arrow as I was from Season 5 Episode 15 to Season 5 Episode 23. That stretch of episodes is, I think it's my favourite thing to come out of the entire Arrowverse. It was such a good string of episodes. There were a few iffy ones in there, but overall, that whole story with Adrian Chase, Prometheus and all that was perfect. And Checkmate came right after it, Fighting Fire with Fire, which was already a strong episode. But Checkmate was the first time since the mid-season 3 final that I couldn't wait to see the episode. I had to stay up and watch it live, which I hadn't done since Season 2. This was the episode that changed everything. It dialed everything up to 11. It introduced Talia al Ghul to present day. It gave us the first evil Adrian scenes and showed us that Josh Segarra was amazing as a villain. Every time both Adrian and Oliver are on screen together in this episode is some of the best acting the show has produced. And the follow-up episode, Cabochon, was also amazing, but this episode was the episode that I realized Arrow was back. Another Arrow episode is at number 17, Broken Arrow, which is Arrow Season 3 Episode 19. So like I already said, Season 3 was still good, but not on the par that the first two seasons were. Broken Arrow, however, was an episode that is still one of the best the show has produced. The episode had some huge game changers for the show. Roy left for good, and he only returned last season. Well, he returned once in Season 4, but he only returned for an extended period last season, and then he's back this season. But there was a huge stretch between this episode and Season 6 where he had been we didn't know where he was. And Thea was killed by Rage. This led to her bloodlust, which is the huge catalyst for her story arc in Season 4 and a good part of Season 5. The revelation that metas aren't just in Central City anymore, but they didn't really follow up on that. As far as I can remember, they didn't do anything else with that story. It was at the end of this episode, we had a cameo from Cisco with Ray being like, oh, this meta wasn't in Central City the night the particle accelerator went off. What does this mean? and then that was kind of it. We never saw anything else about it. But we got our first team up between Ray and Oliver, and the stakes were at the highest they'd ever been during this episode. And seeing Oliver after he hears Roy died, well, died quotation marks, is still hits as hard now as it ever did. At number 16, I have The Promise, Arrow Season 2, Episode 15. So Arrow Season 2 is still one of the highlights of the Arrowverse, and almost all of it is thanks to, well, not almost all of it, most of it is thanks to Manu Bennett as Slade Wilson, who was the villain of the season. And we'd been building to the inevitable meeting between Oliver and Slade for a few episodes at this point, and The Promise was when it all came to a head. Most of this episode took place in flashbacks on Lian-Yu, and it showed us how Oliver and Slade's friendship fell apart. The episode set up what is one of the best runs of episodes in Arrow, besides the Season 5 episodes that I said a few minutes ago. From this episode on to the season final of Arrow, Season 2, is probably my second favourite run of episodes. And number 15 is World's Finest, Supergirl Season 1, Episode 18. So it was confirmed before Supergirl even started that the show and the character would remain secluded from the Arrowverse. Akin to how Black Lightning is being shown now, is that it's not in the Arrowverse, but if they want to do something down the line, they're not exactly saying no. That's what they said with Supergirl when it started. But that didn't last long for Supergirl, however, because Supergirl's ratings were not what CBS wanted them to be, and so just after the mid-season premiere of Supergirl, we got an announcement that the crossover between Supergirl and The Flash would be happening that March. This episode pitted Kara and Barry against Livewire and Silver Banshee, and it was such a fun thing to see. Nothing will ever be like the first time these two characters met. And I think Kara and Barry's friendships is one of my favourite two friendships between any of the two heroes in any of these shows. Barry and Oliver is great, Barry and Kara is great, just all the heroes from separate shows meeting each other for the first time, each time they meet each other, it's so unique. Number 14 is Enter Zoom, which is The Flash Season 2 Episode 16. So after 5 episodes of hyping up Zoom, Enter Zoom was the episode that changed how we perceived him forever. This episode, the end of this episode, contains probably the most brutal few minutes of any of these shows. Arrow has come close a few times for sure, but Zoom just showing up and beating the absolute poop out of Barry, with none of them knowing what was happening until it was over, was insane. This was the first time that Central City knew the Flash could be broken. He could be defeated, he could be killed. And it was so scary having Zoom drag him throughout the city, drag Barry Allen throughout the city, half dead, bringing him to the police precinct, to Central City Picture News, holding him up and saying, "This is your hero," then bringing him back to Star Labs to kill him. It was insane. He obviously didn't kill him, because if he did there would be no show. But still, this was the first time that the show had done anything like this. Number 13 is Flashback, which is The Flash Season 2 Episode 17. So, the premise for Flashback is that Barry travels back in time to his Season 1 self. Season 1 Episode 11 to be exact. His intention is to talk to Harrison Wells before Harrison revealed who he really was. Barry needs the speed equation so that he can be fast enough to beat Zoom. And this episode changed the timeline very slightly, which is really interesting that they did kind of change the timeline and keep it set. Pied Piper, who was a villain in The Flash in Season 1, in this episode, Barry goes back, and because him, Caitlin and Cisco aren't complete dicks to him, he ends up being their friend. So when we get back to the present day version of The Flash, Pied Piper's not a villain anymore, he's a friend to Team Flash now. It was such a subtle little thing. We've never actually seen him come back to any of the shows since, but it was such a little subtle way to be like, timeline's changed. And we also saw Eddie again, for the first time since he died, and it was really sad, but it was an episode that I still love to watch even after seeing it a dozen times. Number 12 is City of Blood, which is Arrow Season 2 Episode 21. So this episode is unique for one reason. It has probably the least amount of fight scenes or action scenes out of any other Arrow episode. But it's what makes it so great. The key to this episode is the character development that everyone receives. This episode happens right after a huge character had just been killed at the end of the previous episode, and this episode was all about all of our characters moving on, not moving on, kind of just, dwelling in what had just happened. And Deathstroke he had crushed our heroes, and this was about them trying to figure out a way to beat him, trying to get the strength to beat him. And Oliver's is broken again. He's given up on life. He attempts to give himself up to Slade, and this is when Laurel pretty much joins Team Arrow. We have our best Sebastian Blood scenes in the entire show, and because the episode focused on the characters themselves more than the looming conflict, it shines every chance it gets. Number 11 is The Odyssey, which is Arrow Season 1, Episode 14. So The Odyssey was the first flashback-centric episode of Arrow. It was originally supposed to be just an experiment to see how this would work from the writers. They wanted to shake things up a little, and it ended up being one of the best decisions they ever made, as most of the time the flashback-centric episodes turn out to be the highlights of their respective seasons. Slade and Oliver met for the first time the episode before this, and so this was all about the two getting to know each other and working together. And if you watch this episode knowing what happens in Season 2, it makes it all the sadder. They had such a good brotherly bond, and it all just blew up in their faces. Number 10 is Fast Enough, which was The Flash Season 1, Episode 23. So Fast Enough was another episode, like City of Blood, that was much more about character development than the actual looming conflict. And for a season final of a show, that's kind of crazy that they do that. But focusing on the characters more than the huge spectacle of the oncoming battle was great. Seeing everyone Barry currently cared about telling him that he should go back in time and save his mother, even though it would change their lives, really put an emphasis on how much these people had grown and become friends and family to Barry. While it was sad to see Harrison Eobard go, which turned out not to be for long, the way it happened was amazing, and I couldn't talk about this episode without mentioning the saddest scene in the entire show: Barry not being able to save his mother. Number 9 is The Climb, Arrow Season 3, Episode 9. So, even though I love Season 5 of Arrow, this episode, to me, feels like the last original episode of Arrow. After this episode, for the rest of Season 3, you can really tell that the quality isn't of the same. It feels cheaper, the soundtrack isn't as good, just the general feel of the show is a lot different. But this episode, if this was the episode that ended the original run of Arrow in a way, it couldn't have been a better one. It could have been a series final if they wanted it to be, because the episode ended on the biggest cliffhanger that the show has ever had: the death of Oliver Queen. Oliver Queen is stabbed through the chest by Ra's al Ghul, and he's kicked off a cliff. And, it's just a way of saying it's a cliffhanger. It's a Batman storyline, but they executed it perfectly. And despite how they resolved the cliffhanger, it's still a great episode. Number 8 is The Legion of Doom, which is Legends of Tomorrow Season 2, Episode 10. So you've probably realised that Legends of Tomorrow is a couple of words that I haven't said much on this list, because Legends of Tomorrow, kind of like Supergirl, it hasn't had many episodes that can reach the highs Arrow and Flash have reached. But this episode is still the best Legends of Tomorrow has put out, and it is amazing. The episode is mostly from the perspective of the villains, and we get to see Eobard, Malcolm, and Damian attempt to break Rip Hunter and gain the secrets to the Spear of Destiny. This episode also reintroduces Black Flash to the Arrowverse, and we get an understandable answer for why Reverse Flash hasn't been erased from the timeline. Number 7, and this one probably will surprise a lot of people because I know that this episode gets a lot of hate, is The Flash Season 3, Episode 17, Duet. So this was an episode that in my opinion could have gone completely wrong if it wasn't handled with extreme care, but luckily the creative teams of both Supergirl and The Flash made an episode that I hoped would become a tradition in the Arrowverse, but it ended up not. But the best parts of this episode were 2 songs made just for this episode, performed amazingly by both Grant Gustin and Melissa Benoist. The 2 of them performing Super Friends is such a fun thing to watch, and I still like singing that song today. This episode also is the first time that we see Supergirl characters other than Kara herself travel to Earth 1. And we did kind of see it in the future with Alex coming over in the last crossover, but we haven't seen it as much. Luckily, I think that this year's crossover is going to remedy the problem with a bunch of Supergirl characters coming over. Number 6 is Tree Ghosts, which is Arrow Season 2, Episode 9. Tree Ghosts is an episode that was my favourite episode of Arrow for a very, very long time. It wasn't until Season 5 that an episode of Arrow actually, I thought in my opinion, was better than it. Tree Ghosts was such a good episode. It changed everything. And it came out on a day when I wasn't doing so good, and it helped me through it, and it's definitely still my most watched episode of the entire show. It also raised the bar for what I thought Arrow could do in their episodes, and it raised the stakes for the show as a whole. We get to see Barry before he becomes the Flash. We get to see him struck by lightning. We see Oliver start on the path to becoming a hero he's supposed to be. We see the death of Shadow, whose death is still having effects on Oliver in seasons 5 and 6. And of course, we get the revelation that Slade is still alive in the present day, and he's coming for Oliver. Number 5 is Invasion, or Arrow's 100th episode, Arrow 5/08. So I do try and keep the crossovers that are very much 1 and 2 parters. I like to keep them together in one thing rather than just, being like, oh, the part 2 is here, part 3 is here. But Arrow's 100th kind of deserves to be its own standalone thing because it is pretty standalone. Because it isn't really burdened by the crossover. But we do have to thank the crossover for giving us the unique circumstances we needed for this episode to happen. If this episode hadn't been during the crossover, or if Arrow's 100th hadn't fallen on the crossover, it probably would have been pretty impossible to do this without the help of another show coming in. But it included almost every single big character the show has ever had in at least some capacity. We got to see Robert and Moira again, Oliver gets married to Laurel, Diggle as the Green Arrow, Tommy was mentioned, so many little references. There were very few characters who had been on the show that didn't at least get a nod through this episode. Number 4 is Invasion, but all of the crossover parts of the episode. So The Flash 3/08, Arrow 5/08, and Legends of Tomorrow 2/07. So the crossover was, for the time, the greatest compliment that the shows and the CW, in my opinion, had been able to pull off. It did such a good job of tying 4 shows together, and it was even better than I thought it could be. I thought no matter what, I would be let down by this crossover, and it didn't let me down in the slightest, and I loved it. But there was one thing that did outdo it, which I thought was impossible, and that brings me to number 3, which is Crisis on Earth X, which was last year's crossover, and Arrow 6/08, Flash 4/08, Supergirl 3/08, and Legends of Tomorrow 3/08 as well, I believe. But Crisis on Earth X somehow beat Invasion, and I didn't think it'd be possible to do, but every year they somehow find a way to up the previous year's crossover. And I'm looking forward to this year, but I don't know, it's going to be pretty hard to one up what they did last year. Number 2 is the best episode of The Flash Season 2, Episode 13, Welcome to Earth 2. So one of the biggest things, like I've said, that have ever happened in the Arrowverse was the introduction of the multiverse. It allowed us to see characters who were dead, Ronnie, Laurel, Deadshot, and it even is the reason why Supergirl is able to exist alongside the other shows. Our first real journey into the multiverse came from this episode, and they went all in with it. The episode was filled with Easter eggs, the phone numbers of the Justice League members, Deadshot and Tomahawk being good guys. We even got glimpses of Supergirl and Connor Hawke. Both of these characters were seen through the multiverse episodes before they appeared. This was before the Legends of Tomorrow episode where Connor Hawke appears, and this was before Supergirl and Flash's first crossover. This is hands down the most fun we've had from an episode of The Flash, and I was really hoping we'd get to see more episodes like this, with either going back to Earth 2 or with different Earths at some point, but we never actually did. And my all-time favorite episode in the Arrowverse is Lian Yu, Arrow Season 5, Episode 23. And the thing about Lian Yu is that if you haven't seen the previous 5 years of Arrow, then this episode isn't going to mean much to you. And it's sad to say, but it's true. The episode isn't going to have much of an impact if you haven't been invested in the previous 5 years of Arrow. The episode brought the show full circle by completing the 5-year flashbacks, and this was more like a 100th episode than the 100th was. The first lines spoken in this episode are the very same first lines spoken in the pilot. We have the return of both Slade Wilson and Captain Boomerang, and honestly, if you were a fan of Arrow, there is very little you can hate about this episode because it had something for every kind of fan, and this is without mentioning the amazing acting from everyone. This episode has some of the best performances Stephen Amell, Josh Segarra, any of them have done in these shows. But there you have it, my top 25 episodes of the Arrowverse, and I'm sure your list varies a ton from mine. So thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you, have a great day.